Now, in the past, many ways have been touted to adapt to a heating planet. These suggestions have often drawn the ire of many activists and scientists. Learning how to live with a warming planet, it was perceived as a diversion from the goal of cutting emissions from fossil fuels. But new reports have now shown how climate change is outrunning emissions targets. Now, the United Nations has suggested that learning to adapt may be our only option. Our next report tells you more.
Nearly 200 nations shape their climate plans around this number, 1.5 degrees Celsius. But that target, set 7 years ago when there was less carbon in the sky, will almost certainly be overshot. Many climate experts believe that outcome is inevitable. The global temperatures will climb higher than 1.5 degrees and that there is no going back. But last month, the United Nations sent the clearest message. Yet that it's time to prioritize adaptation to a world being transformed by the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Every year since the UN issued its last assessment of the climate 8 years ago, the emission of greenhouse gases has increased. The 2015 Paris Climate Accord set a goal of holding global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius of pre-industrial levels, but sadly could not make the ends meet. The International Panel of Climate Change's most recent report released last month says that warming is more likely than not on course to surpass that limit by 2040, even in the unlikely event that the most aggressive emission reduction scenarios are pursued in the US and Europe. The voluminous, fact-filled report states that we are already in the midst of a severe climate disruptions. Adaptation is urgent and we must do so in ways that do not exacerbate already deep inequalities. However, the IPCC has had the most daunting task of corralling the world's leading scientists into a consensus of what the science says about the tumultuous climate changes underway. It's now recognized that how we live with the increasing frequency of floods, droughts and other extreme weather events, and the multiple consequences of those ecological derangements is central to how we navigate into an increasingly volatile future. The report and its companion is filled with every possible color combination to indicate rising sea levels, declining crop yields, and the ways in which landscapes are being deformed by melting glaciers is severely damaging the climate. While the IPCC found that the average annual greenhouse gas emissions between 2010 and 2019 were higher than in any other previous decade, for which records were kept, it also found that the rate of increase in those emissions were notably less than the rate of increase in the previous decade. While the IPCC insists that the climate narrative is still being written and can change, action by government and industries to implement deep, rapid and sustained reductions in greenhouse gas emissions that would significantly slow the rate of climatic shifts over the next 2 decades. The scientists cite the plunging cost of renewable energy and potentially new carbon capture technologies as 2 of the numerous signs that such a goal can be accomplished. As of now, achieving the 1.5 degrees Celsius target may seem like a far-fetched thought, but trying to stabilize the global temperature by achieving a net zero world opens the possibility of a net -1 in which that temperature could be lowered. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now for more on this, Svein Tveidel, a former Assistant Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, joins us live from Norway. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. My first question to you, we've heard these warnings before that global temperatures will shoot above the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. What's your assessment of the current scenario?
Well, it is possible to do it. And here is how to do it. We need to reduce use of fossil fuel by 50% within 2030, and we need energy. So in the same period, we need to triple the production of renewable energy. This will not happen, because if we now ask the major oil companies, for instance, that need to reduce their production by 50-60% within the next 7 or 8 years. If we check their plans, they plan to increase their production maybe to 20% more than today. And that means that we can forget the 1.5 degree goal, and it will be much warmer, unfortunately.
All right. Now, the United Nations, of course, sent out a clear message that it is time to now prioritize adaptation, suggesting, as you mentioned as well, that we are well past the point of prevention. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, it is, of course, necessary to do everything we can to adaptation when it gets warmer. We have all these big problems with rising seawater, with extreme weather, with heat waves, and so forth. So we have to do that, but it is not a good idea because it is much more costly to do adaptation than to reduce emission, and that is up to the politicians, and they take the wrong choices, unfortunately.
All right, so that being said, what sort of climatic shifts can we expect in the years to come at the current rate of emissions?
Could you repeat the question?
I'm saying, what sort of climatic shifts can we expect in the years to come at the current rate of emissions?
Yeah, well, with the current rate of emissions, we will not, of course, stop at 1.5 degree. We will not stop at 2 degree, which is the upper limit recommended in the Paris Agreement. It looks like we will at least pass 2.5 and maybe come to 3 degrees. That is not a recipe on climate crisis. That is a recipe on climate catastrophe. And if you compare, by the way, with fever, we can live with 1 degree, 38 degrees. We can live with 39 degrees, 2 degrees fever. But if the body comes up to 40 degrees, we have a big problem. So we have to learn and know that for each centigrade, the temperature is increasing, the more damage is going to do to the world and to humans.
Right, absolutely. Now, you did mention that this is not a good plan, but when it does come to adapting, what sort of changes and mechanisms can we expect?
Well, if we talk about adaptation, of course, it is extremely important to adapt and increase preparedness for instance, extreme weather. But adaptation in small island development states is meaning that you cannot build dikes around the islands. So their adaptation is to be a climate refugee, leave the country if somebody would welcome you in another country. So that kind of adaptation is extremely tough. It will be the same in northern part of Africa. When the temperature is increasing, it gets warmer. We will have less water. We will have there will be drought. There will be less yield, and in addition to that, there will be more people. So that is not possible. So then these people will desperately try to get out because there is not enough to resource them there, and for instance try to get over Mediterranean as we see today in a much bigger scale than what today is seen as a major problem actually. So what we must do is as fast as possible reduce emissions, then as fast as possible increase production of renewable energy, and in the meantime we have to be prepared for the worst, and that is that the temperature will increase more than what is good and sustainable for the planet.
All right, Mr. Twadwell, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with all your insights on this.
Thanks a lot.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.